It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Again on his afternoon drive. It's still daylight again, 2 days in a row. How we doing, Alan?
It's daylight, but the sun has retreated from western Pennsylvania once again. I don't know if this is snow or rain or what, but we got some things happening,
Yeah, we had like 2 days where it kind of felt like kind of springy. And then there's back to this, so.
Just in time for January to get here, it was like, here you go. Mm-hmm. Here's your January. Steelers practice outside today in the general malaise of the weather conditions, which I thought was interesting. Obviously going to be playing in it on this Saturday. I haven't seen a forecast for the game, but I assume going to be generally the way it's been.
Cold. I don't see any precipitation listed as of now, but low of 17, high of 23 that day. So
17 will do it. 17's cold.
It is, and especially in the stadium, like right along the water there, always tends to feel a little bit colder as well. So, but anyways, glad that they're testing themselves in the elements as they typically do this time of year. One player, as we kind of go through the updates here, just where guys are at injury wise and stuff. You mentioned to me, we kind of saw this come in, like Tomlin said, it was probably we were going to see a return here. Joey Porter Jr. going to play in this one. That's obviously big when you look at the Cincinnati Bengals passing attack. I know Joey had a ton of penalties in the last matchup that they had against this team, but you certainly need him. You need all hands on deck from that defensive back group against this passing attack.
Yeah, he was listed as a full participant yesterday, and I saw him out there again today, and saw him in the locker room today, walking around. Wasn't like, right to the treatment room or anything like that. I would say it looks like it is a full go for Joey Porter Jr. And yeah, that's huge to get him, especially, his physicality against a guy like T. Higgins. I don't really think you can replace or replicate with anybody else on the roster. So I think that's big. And I think it's big for Joey. I think he wants to get back in the saddle. Like, that wasn't a great day for him. What was that, about 6 weeks ago in Cincinnati? I think it's kind of big for him to just get back up on the horse, like and say like, hey, I can do this. We've seen Joey handle receivers better than T. Higgins. With due respect, I don't think he's incapable of doing it. So I think it's going to be a really important matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. It just, like you mentioned, just from like a size physicality standpoint, like I know you got Corey Trice, which is of a similar mold, stuff like that, but like you need those bigger bodied guys when you have a guy like T. Higgins. Jamar Chase, obviously kind of built like a running back, 6 foot, 220 himself, and then like Andre Yoshivas, very physical big guy as well. So like they have the horses offensively. So the Steelers need all hands on deck within the defensive backfield for sure as well. Something else that came out of today, we talked about obviously yesterday, the Rookie of the Year and the Chief Award, Team MVP given today. TJ Watt for the 5th time named Team MVP. 5th time makes him the most in Steelers history, the first player to win it 5 times. What do we make of this? Is this where you would have gone with this award?
Yeah, 5 times in 6 years. This award is voted on by the players themselves, which I think is special, and I'm glad they do it that way. Would this have been my vote? I don't know. I think it really depends on like a lot, like the way you kind of want to parse what MVP means. Like value generally is subjective to replaceability. Like when you think about like value is like the thing that you can least afford to lose. I'm not sure TJ Watt has been that for the Steelers this year. They've got some pretty good edge depth with Nick Herbig and Preston Smith, and I don't think TJ has played. The second part of that is I don't think TJ has necessarily played beyond, or maybe even to like his expectations. I think if you sat there and said TJ Watt has 11.5 sacks going into the last week of the year, I don't know that you would say like, oh, great year for TJ. Like, it's a great year for every other person like ever to roam the earth, but it's not necessarily. I mean, when the man has very recently had double that, it's probably not like what he's
I'd be
feeling
asking
like
how
is,
many games did he miss if I saw that number on the surface.
yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. And so I think I don't know. TJ is probably the absolute best player on the team.
Mm-hmm.
But when you want to talk about like least value, you want to talk about players compared to their own expectations. I think you can come up with different answers. I think I probably would have voted for Cam Hayward, also just because he's never won it, and I feel like
Yeah, that's
that's
crazy.
one of those things where like, at some point he probably should have. And what he's done this year, coming back from injury again, like talking about expectations, I think he's just blown those out of the water. I probably would have voted for Cam, but I don't think TJ is a bad choice.
Now, and the other name that I saw people throwing around, and I wanted to get your take on this, was Chris Boswell, just because of his position. I'm curious as to if you feel like, a kicker, and I understand this is a team thing. It's not like, league wide or anything like that. So we don't need to take it to that level in terms of like if this is something that should happen. But I saw a lot of people throwing Chris Boswell around from a fan perspective. Obviously, when you cross the 50, you feel pretty good about Chris Boswell. So what's your take on that?
I have a pretty hard time. I don't want to say that you would never have a kicker as an MVP, but it would have to be a very unique circumstance to have a kicker be your MVP. It's just, like it's just not a position that is it, too much of that position requires uh, other people's involvement. Like having the best kicker in the league does not get you anything as a team. Like it can, but not on its own, right? Like having the best edge rusher, even if you have a replacement level player at every other position and you have the best kicker in the league, it's not going to matter. If you have a replacement level player at every other position and you have the best quarterback in the league or the best edge rusher in the league or the best wide receiver or left tackle or defensive tackle, like that can make a big difference. I just think it's hard for me. The value of kicking is so tied up in the rest of the abilities of the players on offense mostly, but defense too, that I don't know. I think that's hard to me. Like if you had a team that was really bad in general, but you had
Mhm.
like maybe the best kicker in the league, I could see voting for the kicker as the MVP. Like if Boswell was having his season on the Raiders right now, okay, like I could see that. I just think it's really tough for me to ever say the kicker is the most valuable player on like a team that's having a season like the Steelers.
Yeah, that wouldn't have been the direction that I went. I just think it speaks volumes that even like I've seen some chatter about it to how good he has been, and I think it's kind of twofold because it's how good he's been himself, but also like you could look league wide, but I think everybody kind of looks within their division first and foremost, and you see the struggles of Justin Tucker, you see the struggles of Hopkins in Cleveland, you see the struggles, and then the injury of Evan McPherson, and then having to go to Cade York. And then you just realize how lucky you are to have that guy that you've had in Chris Boswell. So I think that is why maybe that opinion is held.
Yeah, the funny thing is like I'm not even 100% sure this is Boswell's best season, but I think the combination of like Tucker imploding and like the Steelers offense really needing those field goals has certainly kind of raised people's attention to how good Chris Boswell is and has been.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that probably, like I'm saying, I think that there's some added value.
Who would
in
you have voted for?
Cam.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think honestly, my top three would have been Cam, TJ, and then Deshaun Elliott. Maybe I don't know. I think if you're asking me for a third one within there, I don't know. Yeah, I'm probably going to Deshaun Elliott.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to. I think Boswell's a very okay third choice. Like it's hard to parse. If you had to pick, let's say like we have the whole Steelers, the whole NFL awards suite available to us. Who's your Steelers offensive player of the year? Because I mean, if you're going MVP, you're going a lot of defense and special teams before you get to offense. Who's your offensive player of the year for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I'd say George. I think also because how productive he was. Like, I mean, he's 1,000+ yard receiver. He still might get there, but he's 1,000+ yard receiver easily if he doesn't miss those games within this offense. And so it's also again kind of like the twofold thing where there's like value that you see when he's also not playing. Like you see what the passing offense looked like for the time that he did miss and how important he is to the team. So yeah, I think for me it's George.
I have a hard time picking anyone else. I mean, I think Russ you can make an argument for. But man, these last 2 weeks have been tough. Like I think
I would say, did Russ throw it away? Not even trying to make a joke on that. I was just saying, did Russ throw it away the last couple of weeks?
if Russ had been playing and continued to play like he had been the last 2 weeks, I think you could make a good argument for Russ. Yeah.
Yeah. Beyond that, I really don't. I mean, Pat's had a nice year, but like statistically, it
Najee
doesn't show
Harris,
there.
I mean, he's been sort of the same guy as always been. I guess there is value in that consistency. I don't know that's going to win you many awards, though.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I think it's George, probably Russ behind him. Pat is 3 if we had to go a third pick. I don't know. But yeah, that's where I'm at with that.
Maybe Zach Frazier, honestly.
Yeah, that's true. We shouldn't exclude the big boys from this like they do typically for the NFL awards. Okay, so was there anything else that on that note?
Let us know who you guys would have picked. If we have a Steelers afternoon drive comment section MVP, who will it be? I want to know.
There we go. Talked to the coordinators today, Alan. I didn't know if anything really came of that. I'm able to kind of parse through the quotes that I see on the timeline and stuff like that. And typically, like I don't. It's funny because I won't see much from Art, and then like today I saw some stuff from TA, obviously talking about the guys, the fire and kind of challenging each other and people calling each other out and appreciating that they at least care. He used some other language, but that they care. They'd rather have that, obviously. But I didn't know if there was anything that you felt compelling came out of the coordinators talking today.
Well, Art kind of gave you the choose your own adventure version of breaking down the Russell Wilson interception, where he just said mistakes were made and you learn from them. Not who made those mistakes, just the mistakes were made and you learn from them. I think it's pretty clear that George Pickens and Russell Wilson were not on the same page, and also that Russell Wilson should not have thrown that ball. But I mean, I think it's interesting because when Tomlin talked on Monday about how quickly he went to the turnovers, and it's sort of like from a coaching perspective, the idea of controlling this narrative in a way that sort of absolves George Pickens from most of the blame makes a lot of sense. First and foremost, like George is George and requires like kid gloves at times from a coaching perspective. And then secondly, like regardless of who you put the blame on for that interception, Russ has turned the ball over way too much the last couple weeks. And like that's a perfectly fine talking point to emphasize as well. So the coaching staff is kind of able to kill two birds with one stone by sort of kind of blaming Russ for that. I will say I think I'll put most of the responsibility on not turning the ball over on Russ, but that doesn't mean George did everything right either.
Has Russ spoken?
Russ talked today, but I'll be honest, I did not even listen to it. He talked after the game and said that George that's not what he was expecting George to do.
I was just wondering because obviously you go back and like see things on tape and then like talking to coaches, maybe having a conversation with George himself. I was just wondering, now with the benefit of that, if there was a different perspective.
Yeah, he talked today, but I'll be honest, I have a hard time getting through him, man. Like I don't dislike Russ, but it's
Chat GPT.
Yeah, it's basically what it is. It's like, what would a quarterback answer this question with to Chat GPT, and that's what I get. It's who he is. I mean, it's not fake. It's just who he is. I do want to talk about the defense. So TA talked about talking about guys carrying, and Deshaun Elliott talked this morning as well, and kind of walked back some of the things he said after the game. And I think it's funny because there was this like narrative about like, oh, people are blaming one guy. And like, I've been told by several players off the record or sort of on background, I guess is a better way to say it, that that's not the case. That people are not blaming one guy. That like it, that was not some kind of coordinated message. Guys are just frustrated after losing and saying stuff, and then it kind of turns into more than it is. So that was very funny that Deshaun basically said, I shouldn't have said that today. For whatever problems the Steelers have when it comes to miscommunicating uh, during games, they've got the communication on this one down pretty clearly. Like, shut the heck up and get on the same page. That message has been received.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on this yesterday, but like obviously it's one thing to say it, like they're kind of saying all the right things after
Yeah.
this happening, but like man, it's going to be put to the test certainly on Saturday because there's not a better challenge if they got this stuff cleaned up than the Cincinnati Bengals passing attack. So I'm very curious as just how that kind of goes. Like if there is one miscommunication at some point, do we just see things completely break down? Guys start, getting frustrated. They're throwing their hands up in the air, and then what happens post game? Like I think that we're going to this theory is going to be tested in terms of if this defense is on the same page.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I mean, the Bengals are a good offense. They probably won't be on the same page all the time. That's what good offenses do here. Like,
yeah,
it's not some sort of indictment of the Steelers if the Cincinnati Bengals get you out of sorts occasionally. That happens to everybody. They're one of the best offenses in football. It's just about whether you can, make adjustments in the game, weather the storm, not lose your heads, and continue to play winning football.
Where would you do you think maybe because I saw somebody say this in terms of the Steelers defense, like even again acknowledging the struggles they've had over the last few weeks, but even like early on in the season, one thing that they were able to do was adjust in game really well. Like they were the best defense in the league in the second half in terms of points per game given up for how long. Is that also just part of that bigger picture, the struggles over the last few weeks? There's something specifically where they haven't been able to adjust in game the same way for whatever reason. Like, what's your take on that?
I haven't really thought about it that way. I think when you're screwing up and you're getting beat because you're screwing up, nobody like there isn't an adjustment to be made per se. I think what the Steelers do well is come out in a certain look. Hey, the other team is doing this. Tactically, let's make a shift. Now we're going to do that instead and take this thing away that they put in and then make the offense adjust. And also have a good idea of, okay, they're doing A, we're going to do B, then they're going to do C, and we're going to have D ready. Like, I think the Steelers are good at that. But, like, when you're not executing your own game plan, two things happen. One, you don't get to make any adjustments because you're spending your time and your energy and your focus on cleaning up the mistakes. And two, the other team isn't going to change what they're doing until you prove that you can stop it. And so you kind of lose that entire punch, counter punch, chess match part of it that I think the Steelers coaching staff is actually pretty good at. And it helps that they have really veteran players that they can do a lot of different things with. They're pretty nimble in that regard. I think you lose that when you're not executing your own scheme well. Like you don't get the opportunity to make adjustments.
Yeah. And maybe, honestly, what we're talking about here with this defense will be part of this next thing, because I want to ask you actually brought this up. I think it's a good way to tie in what today is, the first day of 2025 here, New Year's Day. Happy New Year's, by the way, to everybody watching or listening. What should the Steelers' New Year's resolutions be? Is figuring things out on the back end of things here for this defense part of that?
Ooh, it could be. It could be. I don't know how many we want to go, or we just want to go back and forth or whatever. My Steelers New Year's resolution, my number one would be the same as a lot of people out there. A lot of you out there, you think like, what's your new? They got to focus on their health. They got to figure out what has gone wrong with their training regimen and program that has allowed them to nearly double their soft tissue injuries from 2023 and got to figure out how they can get better in that area. This is not a team that is just overflowing with talent everywhere. Not that anybody in a salary capped NFL is, but like they, like how different is this team if they even have like an average number of injuries this year? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just it's such a factor in what they've done, and um, it's hard to talk about a lot of these games. Well, if you have to, oh well, the Steelers did this and this and this, but they didn't have George Pickens, and the Steelers did this and this and this, but they're missing half their starting defense, and it's like, well, you kind of gotta grade such things on a curve, like, and that can't be the case going forward. So, as far as like things that are, I don't want to say easily fixable, but like relatively easily correctable, to me, that's like way up there.
Yeah. Easier said than done, but stop turning the football over. Largely this offensive group is better than the Steelers' offenses of the past few years. But the one thing that they have done recently that the past few groups have not done is turning the football over. And to your point, I can, to a degree, I can appreciate what Russ is trying to do at times. But like you said, he knows better, even in these situations where maybe you can put a little bit of a blame on somebody else. Largely, he has been the root of the problem with them turning the football over these last few weeks. And that cannot continue to happen if this team has aspirations of making any noise in the postseason.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I'll just say another kind of like big picture thing that they've got to figure out some answers at wide receiver. Whether that's Roman Wilson, not that I expect him to get involved at the end
Mm-hmm.
of this year, but going into next year, uh, this year's plan was unacceptable in my mind, to trade Deontay Johnson with no replacement, say, hey, we're just going to figure it out, never figure it out. The in-season move is Mike Williams, who for one reason or another never really became a big part of this offense. I just, like, if you look at the again, like, to me, a New Year's resolution is really like when you, it's like something I should have been doing, but I'm not. You know what I mean? And to me, like when you look at this
Mm.
team, like I don't know how they could, I don't know how they went into this season with the wide receiver room looking the way it is, and that's got to, like, they've got to figure out a better plan there.
This one isn't, and one of these I don't want to put on the same level as the other one when I talk about limiting them in this way. I want more of the 30s, less of the 20s. And what I mean by that is there's two spots that I'm talking about. I need to see more Beanie Bishop and less Cam Sutton. And I want to see more Jalen Warren, as we've continued to see, and a little bit less of Najee Harris, just because I think at this point in the year, and I don't know if there's something going on with Najee Harris physically, but I think Jalen Warren is the healthy back now that we were hoping he would be at the beginning of the year and wasn't. And I just think he's looked like the more effective player within this offense the last couple of weeks. So I know that it's trended that direction already. From an offensive standpoint, we've seen more Jalen Warren. I think that needs to continue. But from the defensive side, and I'm not saying Beanie Bishop play 50 plus snaps. I understand there's going to be matchups that aren't great for him. But I look at the tape doesn't lie to me with what Cam Sutton has provided this team, specifically over the last couple of weeks, but honestly, really since he's been inserted into the lineup. And I understand the limitations that Beanie has physically. I don't know that he could give you less than what you've gotten from Cam Sutton, though.
And I think now you have Corey Trice as an option, although
Yeah,
that doesn't fit into your
sure.
20s and
Yeah, the
30s.
30s and 20s thing. Yeah.
I think
Round
Corey
up.
Trice opening himself up as a legitimate third corner option gives the Steelers, hey, if it's a guy where you're like, oh, we just can't have Beanie cover Andre Yoshivas, like he's just going to
Yeah,
dunk on
sure.
him all game. And like, I get it. Like, that's understandable. I think the Steelers now have another playable option there. If things aren't going well with Cam Sutton, and they certainly have not been, I think that's a good one. I don't know that I have one that's more like applicable to the end of this season than the first two I gave. I'm trying to come up with one here. Um, I think that they should be less afraid of being stupid in general, but especially on offense. Like, I know Art Smith is a creative guy. I
Mm-hmm.
know sometimes his creativity comes out in ways that make us all scratch our heads. Like, why is like Aaron Champlin running on 4th and 3 or whatever that, why is it a goal line fade to Cordell Patterson? I get that, but like, I think they should kind of let their freak flag fly a little bit on offense, and like let's see some absolute just goofiness from this offense in terms of like some of the creativity things that we haven't seen. Like, where's the passes to the offensive lineman? Where's the jumbo package in general? Where's the wildcat? Where's the throwback lateral stuff that we see from like the Detroit Lions? I don't know. I want Art to get in his bag in a good way instead of a way it's like, why? And on special teams as well, man. I know Danny Smith still has, like, we talked a lot about the kick return being an issue. Like,
yeah,
all right, let's run a reverse. Let's put George Pickens back there once just to see what happens. What do you have to lose if you're already struggling?
Yeah. No, I fully agree. I want to co-sign the injury thing as well. I would have said that as one of mine if you didn't. But I feel like I have to say this on behalf of the fans. And I know that this is not the ultimate goal, but the New Year's resolution, the ultimate one for this fan base, as we kind of check boxes here that this team needs to check, is play in the divisional round. That's my last one.
All right.
This fan base is chomping at the bit. They need to see them win a playoff game. I need to stop seeing it on my TL on a weekly basis. Every time they lose it, they could lose a game in week 2, and people are bringing up the playoff drought. It doesn't matter when it happens. So like they need to check that box. They need to get that monkey off their back. I know it's not the ultimate goal, but it needs to happen just so I can stop hearing about it.
I'm telling you what, I think this is like the dumbest thing. And you know what's going to happen? Here's what's going to happen. The Steelers are going to go to Houston, beat a very mediocre Texans team, and then go in the second round and lose by 30 to the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead. And no one is going to feel any differently than they do about this team right now after they won their playoff game. And I am going to go berserk on the universe for having to hear about the, oh my God, it's been 8 years since they won a playoff game. For like, I'm ready to pounce on the hypocrisy of this being the number one focus of the fan base for so long when it means nothing and you don't actually care about it, and you're going to feel actually not caring about it very soon if they do win a playoff game this year.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree, but it's just for my own sanity. I need to be able to say that they won a playoff game.
I'm actually kind of now rooting for that scenario to just like 23-20 overtime win in Houston on a 63-yard Boz game winner. Steelers at Chiefs division round 47-3. That's like I want that to happen just so I can watch the people who have done nothing but hyperfixate on winning a playoff game experience exactly how little that means.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, I'll probably be busy for that Steelers Now post-game show if that happens, 47-3. Anyways, I want to get one question in here at least before. And we asked you guys for comments about the MVP and stuff like that. We want New Year's resolutions as well. Not your own. If you want to drop your own, that's fine. But more so Steelers related ones we want in the comments as well. But Steeler Nation in the Heartland with a question here. And we appreciate this is something we've kind of maybe talked about a bit, but I think we can go more in depth.
Where do you think the Heartland is? Like, when you hear the Heartland, where do you think of?
So this is probably stupid, but I think of like, because I watch Pat McAfee and stuff, I think of when they were doing Heartland Radio, like Barstool Heartland. I that's kind of where my mind goes.
Like Indiana?
Yeah.
I'm going like Kansas, Nebraska, somewhere out there. Iowa, maybe it's a big Logan Lee guy. I don't know. I just let us know where in the heart.
Yeah.
Because this is like one of those questions like, where is the Midwest? Like, there is no real right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
Anyway.
but this person, wherever they are, I'm assuming is what they are considering the Heartland. So I'm curious where the specific person, Steeler Nation in the Heartland, is commenting from. They said, "Thanks for everything in 2024. Looking forward to the new year. It's been mentioned on here that the Steelers are cheap when it comes to salaries for the coaching staff, and also the staff isn't big in comparison to other teams. What are the potential coaching position or general responsibility additions that the Steelers could benefit from if they were willing to expand the staff?"
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So one of the things I've kind of repeatedly hammered the team for on here is I think they had a good thing going when they brought in TA as a senior defensive assistant, someone who had been a coordinator before, to be an additional sort of set of veteran experienced eyes and ears for one side of the ball. They eventually promoted TA to defensive coordinator. They brought in Brian Flores for that same role. It was never going to be more than that between the Steelers and Flores because unlike TA, who's kind of in the second half of his career and I think was very happy to just be a defensive coordinator again, Flores wants to be a head coach, and he wasn't going to get there from being Mike Tomlin's defensive coordinator. So it was not going to be more than that with him, and that's okay. The Steelers made a very nice move to bring in Flores. I thought he was really good for the team, but when he left, they didn't replace him, and they never took that thought to the offensive side. I mean, I think technically Mike Sullivan is the senior offensive assistant right now, but like, come on, like they never really tried to replicate that process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you look at Mike Tomlin's popularity among coaching and like what like his the absolute right we talked about the sun and then here it is. The absolute sort of reverence that the NFL community has for him. And like I tell people this all the time, and I swear like doesn't get through. Is like when I go to NFL events, like among NFL people, Mike Tomlin is a rock star. Like I don't think like Pittsburgh people don't feel that. Like he is like if you polled NFL coaches and was like, who do you want to work with? Who do you look up to? Like Mike Tomlin is like in the very top of that list for everybody. And like the Steelers, I don't feel like the Steelers are leveraging that popularity that he has and the ability to add these guys to staff. It doesn't need to be a specific area of responsibility. It's just another set of experienced eyes and ears. I think that's a big deal. And then when you talk about the number of guys on the staff, I think that's where, like, if you want to know why Mike Tomlin doesn't have a big coaching tree, it's because he's had experienced position coaches, i.e. old position coaches. Old coaches don't get promoted. They also don't leave until they retire. And when you don't have like assistant coaches, like if you don't have an assistant offensive line coach, which the Steelers didn't for a very long time, then when Mike Munchak leaves, you don't have another buddy, and you don't have somebody that people are trying to poach. And like I think the Steelers get by okay with the staff they have, but they don't do a very good job of developing coaches because they have such a small roster of coaches, and most of their coaches are experienced guys.
Does the money come into play not only in terms of like, excuse me, like I think Arthur Smith's a fine offensive coordinator, but I know people always talk about the quality of coach, but also is that more so why it's a smaller staff, or you think Tomlin just likes to kind of keep it a smaller group of people?
I don't really know the answer to that question. I've asked Mike, and of course he's not going to say if it's
Yeah.
I'd love to have 10 more people, but Art won't let me. Like, he's not going to say that, even if he would.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess is the best way I can say that.
Yeah.
I think part of it is certainly that Mike values like unity of voice. I don't think that's an ego thing. I think it's a messaging thing that like you want everyone to be on the same page. You want the messaging from every coach to the players to be consistent. And the more people on a staff you have, the harder that is to do. So I think maybe some of the like, why don't the Steelers have 14 assistant wide receiver coaches? I think some, especially because you can pay those guys like nothing. Like it's not like it's a big money layout. I think that's probably part of it. But look, I mean, the Steelers are in the bottom third of the league in revenue. So like, it's not like people say like, oh, the Rooneys are cheap. I'm like, I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Like the Rooneys only make money on football. They are not someone who is already a billionaire from doing something else that has a football team as a side project. Like the Pittsburgh Steelers have to make money. I don't think that most of the. Do you think David Tepper cares if the Carolina Panthers run a profit? Like, no, he doesn't. Like, it's irrelevant to him. And so, that's just sort of the challenge that the Steelers and the Bears and the Giants and the Packers that don't have that type of ownership have to deal with. It doesn't mean that that's insurmountable, but like, look, if they want to try to save some money on the coaching staff from here and there, I mean, I guess it's kind of understandable.
I want to add real quick too, because in terms of the responsibility stuff, two real quick things that I noticed. Obviously, with Brian Flores, and we've talked about this a ton, but I'm curious as to if what would be the offensive comparable to them. We talked about, when you had that other presence, and you had somebody in a different position maybe than they would be, and you had somebody else in the booth that helped out Mike Tomlin in the challenge department, which we've seen. Feel like there was like an uptick in that area for that reason, and also TA being more of like the defensive backs background. Brian Flores brings a lot of like exotic blitz and stuff. We're seeing that come to fruition in Minnesota with what he's doing with that defense. So I think like if you were to add somebody that kind of goes hand in hand with what TA brings to the table, it's not like a co-defensive coordinator thing, right? But it's just somebody that brings a different element that maybe if there is an area where TA is lacking or could use a little bit of help, that's where that other person comes in.
Yeah, or how about this? Let's say the Steelers this year, I don't think they will, okay, but let's say the Steelers this year decide they're going to draft a quarterback in the second round. I'm like, okay, this is our guy that is going to eventually replace Russ, okay, or whoever the quarterback is. Okay, Arthur Smith, I think, is a really good offensive coordinator. He didn't play quarterback, he played offensive line. He's never coached quarterbacks outside of when he's been the offensive coordinator. So go find some quarterback guru type to come be your senior offensive assistant who can develop a quarterback for you, especially considering how poorly they did developing Kenny Pickett. Like, I think that, and that was a continual emphasis that we had when they had Canada here, is that there was no one on the staff that had ever developed a quarterback before. And like, how are you supposed to do it if you've never done it before? And I think, just fit. It doesn't have to be a specific area of responsibility, but fit it to the talent level of the people around. Like if you have a really inexperienced, let's say TA retires and the Steelers hire some 37-year-old former player to be defensive coordinator. Okay, then go get a senior defensive assistant who's 63 and has been in the NFL for 40 years and has seen literally everything there is to see, and combine inexperience with experience, or however you want to do it. I just think there's value in those people. There are people out there that the Steelers could have brought in that would have added value to what they're doing that they didn't. And there isn't really a good reason not to.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Good stuff. We appreciate that question. We appreciate all the questions that we get. So keep those coming, obviously, in the comments, whether it's a thought, topic that you want us to discuss on here, a question, all that good stuff. Alan, until tomorrow, tell the people they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now sites account, SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the word so I can get paid. Like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode of Morning Rush, Afternoon Drive, Sights and Sounds. There's video, Roman Wilson running in breaking routes. It's like everybody's favorite things combined. Roman Wilson in the middle of the field. It's like a Steelers fan obsession Venn diagram. Go check out that video. And then, all the rest of the good stuff.
There you go. Leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else. Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from. Search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Do that over there. Do the same thing on TikTok, and then you'll find me everywhere. Zachary Smith, PGH. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.